Hello, friends. I hope all of you are doing great and wonderful in your life. So let's get started on a new topic today. I think one of the topics that we're going to talk about today is about communication. And further in communication, we'll look at communication styles. So without any further ado, let's get started about what exactly do we mean by this topic called communication styles. So a few questions that you might want to reflect upon is, what is your communication style, first of all? And when I say communication style, I'm not talking about verbal, non-verbal, not those. Those are types of communication. What I mean by forms of communication or styles of communication is the manner in which you tend to communicate. So that's one question I want you to reflect upon. And plus, as you walk through the entire presentation, you might also want to think about what is the predominant communication style that you adopt during all situations. And most importantly, which one would you want to adopt? Is this the right strategy? Is this not the right strategy? So on and so forth. So lots and lots of questions to answer. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. So let's get started about communication styles. So when we talk about communication styles, what do we really mean by this? Okay, so here is what the definition is. A communication style is defined as the usual mode of communication adopted by an individual. Very simple, plain English. It means that what you generally tend to speak, the manner in which you speak is your communication style. So that is what becomes your style of expressing and conveying your ideas. Now, there are four broad communication styles that we need to understand, and then perhaps you'll be able to decipher which one are you using presently and which one are you supposed to be using in general. Okay, so let's understand more about that as well. This is what we call as the communication styles. There are four of them. So let me give you a brief idea about each one of them, and then we will dig deeper into each of them as well. So in this diagram, you'll see two major components. One is the openness for communication, and the other is consideration for others. Now, what is openness? Openness is how open are you in your communication? So it means, are you willing to express? Are you willing to share openly, without fear, confidently? So openness could be high, openness could be low, right? So that's openness to communication. And the other factor that you need to consider here is what we call as consideration for others. So when you speak, when you express your ideas, your thoughts, do you think about others, or are you all about yourself? So even consideration could be high, it could be low. Okay. Now, given those two factors, we have a 2x2 matrix of communication styles, and here are the four. So we'll talk about passive, aggressive, passive aggressive, and assertive communication as well. So let's begin by understanding what do we mean by passive communication style. So as the name suggests, passive communication style is a style where people do not speak much, where people do not express themselves completely. It's a very subdued, suppressed form of communication. And that's why if you look at the diagrammatic representation, passive, which is right at the bottom, is caught up between two ends. One is high consideration for others, where I'm consistently thinking about other people and what will they feel. And on the other hand, it is very low openness to communication. So I'm not opening up, I'm not sharing, I'm not talking about what I think is the right thing to do. Now, why do people become passive communicators? That's an important question to answer. So people in general can become passive for several reasons. And some of these reasons could be cultural as well. For example, if your cultural, your family upbringing is that you do not back answer your superiors, your elders, you just listen to what they have to say, I'll keep my mouth shut. In some cases, people are passive by nature. They think that if I speak what I want to say, possibly it might agitate people, it might hurt their sentiments, or I don't know, I'll make sense or not, I don't think I'm good enough. All those kind of baggages stop people from opening up, and therefore they tend to become passive. For example, if a colleague walks up to your desk and says, you know what, I want you to share some of my workload. There is so much on my plate. Would you please do that? Now, you want to say no because you're already working on something important, but because you're a passive communicator, you might end up saying, okay, all right, fine, I'll do it. Now, you wanted to say no, but you couldn't say it because you're a passive communicator. Now, this generally tends to happen either because of authority or because you've never been able to say no. In some cases, people find it very difficult to say no, almost feel guilty about saying no, because saying no means I don't have the right attitude or I might end up hurting people and so on and so forth. So many reasons why people cannot say no. And that's why they end up becoming passive. Now, what's the problem in being passive? The fact is you'll be frustrated because you're doing things that you're not supposed to do. Perhaps you're doing extra work in many cases, and you never feel satisfied that you spoke your heart out because you're suppressing your thoughts, and that kind of makes you feel very, very frustrated. So that's typically what you see with passive communicators. Now, if you flip the coin, on the complete opposite side is what you see as aggressive communication. Now, as the name suggests, aggressive communicators are aggressive communicators. They speak loudly, they speak in a tone which is dominating, and they will always want to make sure that their point is not only heard, but is accepted. Not through consensus building, but by sheer force or by sheer influence. So aggressive communicators are someone who don't like others messing up with their idea. These are people who are very clear about what they want, how they want, when they want, and others better listen to what they have to say. So aggressive communicators are really, really aggressive by intent and by nature. Again, in some cases, people are aggressive by nature. In some cases, the cultural nuances in an organization end up making people aggressive. So they tend to express themselves very, very vocally and openly. So if you look at aggressive communication, it is very high openness to communication. I don't have any problem expressing myself. I will say what I want to say. I will call a spade, which is good in some sense, but the problem is very low consideration for others, which means I don't care a damn what others feel or think. I will say what I want to say. And unfortunately, aggressive communicators, the problem with them is that they hurt sentiments quite often. Now, do they always want to? May or may not be, but they're not considerate. They're not thinking about the equation of relationships. So in their mind, I just need to say what I want to say. I don't care what the other person thinks or feels about what I want to say. That's how they are, aggressive by intent. We next have a category called as passive aggressive communicators. Now, that's quite an interesting category. So it might sound like it's a mixture of aggressive and passive, but it's not. So passive aggressive falls somewhere in between, but it's not a mixture. So what you see in terms of passive aggressive communication is very low consideration for others, and at the same time, low openness as well, which means that I will not directly say what I want to say. Maybe there is an indirect channel through which I'll say it, which means I will manipulate, which means I will be sarcastic at times. There are undertones to what I'm saying. Now that's a bit of a problem. In fact, it's a big problem. So why do people behave in such manner where they don't speak up, at the same time they're not considerate about others as well? Why do people behave like this? Well, again, in some cases it's by default, where the nature that I possess is I don't speak up openly, but I have hidden agenda. In some cases, the organization culture becomes responsible for people to start acting in funny ways, and therefore they become passive aggressive. They will say, but say it in an indirect manner, or they will seem to be agreeing to an idea when they're actually not agreeing to it. So that's the problem with being passive aggressive. In fact, amongst all the four, if you have to pick one style as the worst, it's definitely going to be passive aggressive, because it not only spoils a relationship in the long term, but it generally opposes basic human behavior and basic human thought. There is no cooperation or collaboration, but there is more of sarcasm, manipulation, unnecessary politics, and hidden agenda. So best avoid it. So if you're into this category, watch out for that. And then finally, we have something called as assertive communication. What is assertive communication? This is the best form of communication, the ideal remedy for most of the conversations that we engage in. So when we talk about assertive communication, you will see it typically falls between the zone of high openness for communication, which means I will say what I want to say, but it also has high consideration for others, which means the manner in which I will say something will not hurt sentiments, will not offend people's ego. It means I'm very, very cautious about what I'm going to say, but I'll say what I want to say. I will not withhold my ideas. I will not mince my words. I will not take a detour. I will not take an indirect approach. I will say things the way it should be said, but at the same time, I'm cognizant of the fact that I should not be hurting sentiments. I need to be empathetic towards other people in the room as well. So that's where assertive communication gains a lot of prominence. Now, what are some of the characteristics that define each of these styles? And it's important for us to understand the characteristics, because if you possess any of these characteristics, you'll be able to correlate with it better. And then you'll be able to understand which one of these are you using at this particular moment in time. Okay, so let's look at the characteristics of each of these communication styles. So this is a pictorial representation. If you look at the body language as well in each of these images, you'll be able to identify the way people in general communicate and how they appear or demonstrate their communication style. Okay, so let's look at the first one, passive communication style. Now, passive, as I said, is very, very passive, docile. Those are a couple of things which define passive communication. But if you have to remember certain key characteristics of passive communicators, whether it's you or someone else, here they are. They are always apologetic. Now, what do I mean by that? They will say sorry a lot of times. Now, saying sorry is a good thing if you've made a mistake, but they will invariably say sorry a lot of times. You know, I'm sorry to have hurt you, or oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, I'm really sorry. Please, please forgive me. It's almost over apologizing for something that you believe is correct, right? So apologetic, very, very apologetic, almost feeling guilty in case my idea doesn't work, or if people seem to be hurt with what I said. So they will apologize too much, which is a problem. Always full of self-doubt. Should I say this? Should I not say it? What if I say this and others say this? But if I don't say it, would it be a good idea? You know what's happening here? So much of self-doubt. And because there is so much of self-doubt, the best option, therefore, is shut up. Don't speak, because you don't make sense. And this self-doubt kind of kills you from within. And that's an unfortunate part of the story. And therefore, a lot of passive communicators struggle with it. And that's one of the reasons why they tend to feel frustrated. The client is saying something, and I know the client is not right here, but I don't want to encounter the client because it's the client. Who opposes the client? Are you idiot? No, I will not do that. So I'll better shut up. Now, that's the problem with a passive communicator, is that they don't speak up. They don't open up. And therefore, they're always indirect. You know, what I mean to say is, I hope you're getting what I'm trying to say, right? No, but you're getting me, right? No, I'm not getting you, because you're indirect. When you're indirect, nobody understands what exactly do you mean to say. So they're apologetic, they're self-doubting, indirect. Now, are these the only characteristics that define passive? Not really, there are many more. For example, you can also look at their body language, their tonality, very submissive. Body language is very fidgety. I'm not confident about what I'm trying to say here. You can also look at that in the image that you see on screen. So all of this is about passive communicators. Then we have the aggressive communicators. So aggressive communicators are in complete contradiction to a passive communicator. So a passive communicator is someone who doesn't feel confident, but aggressive communicators are extremely confident, even when they're not supposed to, even when they don't know things, they're extremely confident. But the major problem is they're dominating. They want to shove their idea down your throat. Whether you like it or not, you have to accept what they say. And they're very animated to an extent that they would, punch their fist in the air, they would bang the desk, they would make a point very strongly, visibly, physically, every which ways. But the major problem is, and I think this is a major problem, is that they're highly disrespectful about others. So an aggressive communicator would generally fail to form consensus. What is consensus? Consensus is where, let's say you're in a meeting, out of 10 people, you would want 8 or 10 people to believe in what you say or agree to you logically. But that's not the style of aggressive communicators. They will enforce an idea upon you, and you better agree with them. So that's outright disrespectful. I don't care what you're thinking. I don't care what you feel when I say something. I want you to do what I want you to do. Now, generally, people tend to believe that only authority or people in authority are aggressive, which is right to an extent. is that your authority gives you power and therefore people are likely to be more aggressive. But that's not completely true. There are a lot of people who are in the front line, who are in the junior management, who are equally aggressive, which means aggression can also be a part of your personality. And therefore, you trying to demonstrate that aggression in each and every conversation that you have with people. Sometimes people can be aggressive with clients. Sometimes they can be aggressive with their bosses or their subordinates or their colleagues. So it's not only about authority. Authority can be a big reason, but not the only reason for people to behave in this manner. But another flaw is that they always blame. It's not about me, the situation was bad or my team members did not do well enough and therefore this happened. So that can be another attribute that defines aggressive communicators. Again, not the only qualities, but these are some of the major ones which will definitely be there in aggressive communicators. We then have the passive aggressive. Now, the passive aggressive, as I said, is highly, highly manipulative to an extent that they will play politics in the manner in which they express their ideas. So, for example, you share an idea with them, everyone says, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. They'll say, yeah, it sounds like a decent idea, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe if everyone says, okay, what's the harm? Let's go for it. So very sarcastic in their tonality, highly dishonest in their intent. That's why there are hidden agendas. Now, as I said, people could be like that because of their behavior in general. Sometimes the culture does not allow people to open up, and therefore they tend to become very, very indirect, very, very sarcastic in their tonality. And because they have a hidden agenda, they tend to meet their own selfish objectives. So that's something which you generally tend to adopt with passive aggressive people. Now, if you see passive aggressive people in your team, what should you do? First and foremost, encounter them, but don't encounter them in front of everyone, because that might be a dangerous thing to do. It's like attacking someone in the open, and they might be very defensive about that. But talk to them. Sometimes they don't even realize that they're being passive aggressive. You need to talk to them. You need to talk to them in private. Confidentiality is important. And bring it to their notice that, look, the way you behave or the way you agree or disagree to an idea, it doesn't sound good. I mean, there is an undercurrent of sarcasm to it. It sounds manipulative. So I don't know if you mean that, but this is what it comes across. So it's important to encounter that. It's important to talk about this openly, especially if you're the leader and you observe some of your team members behaving like this. Perhaps that could be an indication of the culture, and you've got to rectify that as well. So important category to watch out for. And then finally, you have assertive communication. Now, amongst the four, assertive communication is highly, highly recommended, not just in the corporate world, but in general, as an individual, as a human being, you got to be assertive. Now, what do we mean by assertive communication? Assertive people are confident about themselves. They know what they're talking about. They're direct in their approach. But most importantly, they're sensitive and empathetic towards others. So if I have to put it this way, aggressive people are pathetic to others, but assertive people are empathetic towards others, which means there is a consideration about others people's thinking and feelings. Now, why is that important? Because we are always surrounded with people, either in the family or at the workplace. You have people around you. Now, even if you disagree with them, there has to be a manner in which you disagree. You can't bluntly disagree with someone. I don't care what you say. No, that will not work. A lot of people do that, and they think they're assertive, but they're not. What happens in that case is you end up spoiling your relationships. Now, it's important to be direct. It's important to be straightforward, but it's even equally important to be sensitive about others. Yeah. And we're going to look at some phrases which I'm going to share with you, which will help you say the right things in the right manner. So assertive communication is the crux of modern day workplace communication. You can't be passive all the time. You can't be aggressive all the time. And as far as possible, you should never try to be passive aggressive. The ideal default approach that you want to take up is the assertive approach. Now, having said that, is it wrong to be passive at times, or is it wrong to be aggressive at times? Not really. Sometimes it's okay to be passive. For example, if you have a client who is working with you for quite some time and you feel that giving them a little bit of discount is okay, or agreeing to their demands is okay because it's in the best interest of both the organizations, maybe you'll be a slightly more passive there than being assertive or aggressive. Similarly, as a family person, sometimes as a father, as a mother, when it comes to kids, we all tend to become passive at times. We yield to their demands, which is okay at times. But is that the right thing to do all the time? Not really. Okay, so there are exceptions where it's okay. Similarly, being aggressive, when you see people are lethargic, laid back, lackadaisical, maybe you want to step up the gas, you want to be slightly more aggressive in your intent. But again, not a good default style. So exceptions are okay, but in general, it's assertive communication that has to be the order of the day. But again, never be manipulative, never be indirect with people or sarcastic. So passive aggressive is out of the window. Okay, so these are the four styles. Let's understand how do we become more assertive in our intent. Now, this is an important diagrammatic representation to look at. It doesn't have passive aggressive because anyhow that's a completely wrong style to adopt. But if you look at passive and aggressive, they are poles apart, right? Passive says, I let you have power on me, so you decide whatever you tell me, I'll accept that. On the other hand, aggressive says, I seek power over you, so what I say, it's my way or the highway, right? Now, in between the two, that's where assertive communication comes in. It's that I demand respect and I'll provide you the same. So let's talk mutual respect, because that's how we will flourish. That's how we will blossom together. And that's the beauty about assertive communication. You might say, all this is great, but how do I remember all of this? Okay, so the simple way to remember this is through animals. Okay, now you might wonder, what has this got to do with animals? We are talking about human beings here. Now, animals are being talked about because it will help you remember. So you have to identify which animal or what animal do you represent here. Okay, so if you're a passive communicator, it's almost like a turtle where you're always going into the shell. You let the whole world beat you because you think that's your destiny, that's your karma, and therefore you can't do anything about it. So you're a turtle if you're a passive communicator. If you are an aggressive communicator, you're like a snake about to pounce on people and bite them with your venom, even if there is no requirement of it. So aggressive communicators are always ready for a war, always ready for a fight. That's how they are by intent and by demeanor. Then you have passive aggressive. It's almost like a old fox, which is very cunning, which knows the tricks of the trade, and it can be very, very selfish, outright sarcastic, and will always have a hidden agenda to fulfill. You don't want to be a fox, okay? But if you see a fox, you should be able to identify a fox with their agendas. But last but not the least, you want to be a wise owl. You want to be assertive. You want to say what you want to say, and in the best possible manner, while being considerate, empathetic about the ideas and thoughts about other people. Okay, so these are the four animals. The turtle is the passive, the snake is aggressive, fox, passive aggressive, and then you have the wise owl, which represents assertive communication. Now, question that you might have is, I want to be assertive, but I simply can't seem to be getting a hang of it. I've always been passive, or I've always been aggressive. How do I change to be an assertive communicator? Well, that's $1 million question. And there are things that you can do about this. Okay, first, let's look at what are some of the phrases that you can use when you want to speak assertively, because a lot of times assertiveness is in the vocabulary. Okay, it's also in the body language and tonality, but it's equally important that you use the right vocabulary. So I'm going to give you some phrases that you can use, and I'm not saying these are the only ones, but these are some of the important ones that you're likely to use time and again. Okay, so try using these, and I'm sure they will keep you in good stead. Okay, so the first of those, one of my personal favorites is, although I don't agree with you, I respect your point of view on this matter. Which means we could have different perspectives. You could have a different perspective. I could have a different perspective. And it's great that we have different perspectives. But I don't agree with your perspective. And when you say this, of course, you got to have some justification as to why you disagree. So don't just disagree for the heck of it. A lot of times people just think that saying no is a great thing. But when you say no, you got to have some justification around it, especially when you're in a forum like a meeting. Where you say no, you justify why you say no. So I disagree with you because of so and so reasons. So that's one thing that you can use. The other thing is, I understand where you're coming from. However, I have a different opinion here. Almost similar to the first one, but this is slightly more refined in saying that I know why you're saying what you're saying. You're saying it because this is what happened in your department or in your function, or this was your previous experience which makes you say something like this. However, I have a difference of opinion here. I think that was an exception. Maybe we need to look at this. So that's a good way of putting things across. It is considerate, it is respectful, but at the same time, you're saying no when you don't agree, right? So that's a good way to put it across. I would have loved to help you, but I'm caught up with another priority right now. So when do you use this? Now, this is something which is to be used when someone knocks on your desk and says, you know what, I want you to share my workload. I want you to take up something off my plate. Well, you're already working on something which is important. Do you give up on that? You can't. So you got to put it across saying that, look, I don't have any problem working with you, for you, or completing your task. However, right now I'm caught up with another priority. I can't give up on that. A lot of times we find it difficult to be assertive with our own colleagues rather than our bosses or managers. Why is that so? Because we are also thinking about their emotions. For example, if you're seated at your desk and one of your colleague walks by who invites you for a cup of coffee or a smoke break, it's very hard to deny that, right? It's very hard to say, no, not now. But you have to say it, especially if you're working on some priority. So this is the kind of sentence that you got to use. Does this guarantee people will not feel bad? There is no guarantee for it. But you got to start using this so that people respect your time and space. The problem is, because we are so considerate about how people will feel, it's okay if we feel bad. Again, you're being passive. So you got to come out of that shell and you got to say no when you need to say no. So it's all about practicing it. And that's where sentences like these can be extremely helpful. This is a good one. So when someone offers you to join their team, join their organization, but you don't want to take the offer, either you're not interested or it's not something that you're excited about, whatever the reason, you can easily say, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in this project currently. Which means I respect the fact that you've offered me something. I really appreciate that. But you know what? It doesn't excite me, or it doesn't excite me currently. Maybe I can relook at this later. So can we talk about this later? Whatever it is, but you got to tell the other person. Sometimes people want to say no then and there, but just because they don't want to offend, they'll say, can I come back to you in the next couple of days? Now, what you've done is you've created false hope. The other person is anticipating, he said 2 days. That means he's going to come back to me with some positive news. You have to kill the suspense. You have to tell people the bad news then and there. Will people feel bad at times? Yes, they will, because they're human beings. But you got to say what you want to say then and there so that people understand that you're vocal about what you're thinking. And that's important. That's an important message to pass. And then finally, I'm afraid I will have to say no to your request. This is straight, very straightforward, but you have to use it. Sometimes people will come up to you with a project that they are interested in, which you are not, or they will give you an opportunity in the form of a job, in terms of a business assignment, whatever it is. But you'll have to say no, okay? So assertive communication is about saying no, but it's about saying no the right way. It's about saying no, being considerate, empathetic while you're saying no. It's not just about saying, no, I will not do it. That's not what you want. You want to say, no, I respect what you said, but I don't think it's a good idea. Or I understand that you want me to work with you on this project. However, I'm caught up with something else right now. You have to start doing it. So how do you do it? Number one, start small. You got to start practicing these phrases in your everyday life. Unless you practice it, it just wouldn't happen like a miracle. So don't expect on the 20th of December, this will change and I will become assertive. That's never going to take place. So you got to start using it every single day of your conversation, and use it with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family, with your manager, with your clients. Take small baby steps to begin with. And that's how you'll become more and more assertive. Secondly, give yourself some time, because you've been following a particular style of communication for a long, long time. Immediately switching over might be difficult for you. So take some time. It's okay. Breathe easy. But all in all, try to be more assertive in your intent, in the way you present your thoughts and ideas. So if you do that, I can guarantee you, you will not feel frustrated, and you will also preserve your relationships. So I wish you all the very best in trying to adopt some of these strategies. and adopt the right communication style when you're communicating at the workplace or even perhaps in your family. Okay, so what are you waiting for? Use these and do let me know about any other help, any other recommendations or suggestions I can make here. But it's important for you to start being more and more assertive in your communication. And if you don't become assertive, let me also warn you about something. People who are not assertive end up being only the first three alphabets of the word assertive. I'll repeat that. People who do not become assertive end up being only the first three alphabets of the word assertive. Now, I'm not going to explain that to you. I think you're sensible enough to understand that. And we'll meet again soon for another topic very, very soon. Till that time, please take care of yourself and bye-bye for now. Thank you so much.